I realized as I was watching with this scripture this week, it's really interesting that given how many of the places in Scripture, the stories are so patriarchal in nature, that when we look at the high holy day stories, Christmas, Easter, the focus ends up with the women, the mothers. This is certainly true here at this Advent time. Most years, we read the story on this Sunday of Elizabeth, Zechariah's wife. We hear about how she was old and faithful and had not been able to have a child, and then suddenly she was pregnant with this child who would leap for joy in her womb when that child met another surprise baby carried by her cousin Mary. We hear these stories of these women who find themselves in these unexpected situations, and we hear so little about the guys. This story is not one that ends up typically in the Advent rotation, and I think that's unfortunate. I think we skip over this Zechariah story for a couple of reasons. We like the miracle nature of Elizabeth and Mary. And also, I think we're supposed to think that Elizabeth and Mary are really the true example for how we should respond when God calls us into partnership with God's work. We're supposed to respond with this immediate and unequivocal, "Oh, yes, Lord, use me." And I'm just going to be real. If I'm Mary or Elizabeth and I find myself pregnant unexpectedly, I do not have the same willing grace that those two girls had, because my babies sleep through the night and change their own pants. I think we have this expectation that we have to respond like Mary and Elizabeth, and absolutely they are such a good example for us. But I think sometimes, at least for me, I don't know about you, but it's a little unrealistic almost. And I need somebody who can be more of a real role model for me, and that seems to be, at least for me, Zechariah. Zechariah is a priest, and he shows up for work on this particular ordinary day. Doesn't seem to be a special high holy day. Somebody rolled some dice and played craps, and it was Zechariah's turn to go into the holiest of holy places, into the sanctuary of God, and burn incense. And even though he was in the holiest of the holy place, it was as if Zechariah just showed up for another day's ordinary work and didn't really expect anything special or out of the ordinary to happen, right? He just expected that you'd show up and sing the right hymns and pray the right prayers, and out back we go and onto our way. Until, of course, the angel Gabriel shows up. Anytime Gabe shows up, what does Gabe always say? Dude must have been scary. It doesn't matter. Every time Gabe shows up, he scares the daylights out of people. And he comes and surprises Zechariah, who's just trying to do his thing. And he says, "Hey, so I'm Gabe, and I need to tell you on behalf of God, God's trying to do something up in here. And there's really nothing at this moment God needs for you to do. This is just information only. This is not an action item. This is just information only. And so God's going to do a little something here. And Zechariah, maybe you are much more faithful than I would be. But when God shows up and surprises us and has this extraordinary thing, because God's always doing extraordinary things, Zechariah, like I might say, would be like, yeah, right. Zechariah says, oh, let's take a minute, God. Now, God, seriously, how can this be? This cannot be so. Zechariah says probably what many of us have often said. Maybe you found yourself in a situation that really seems too good to be true. And yet it's happening. And Zechariah is a realist, and probably like many of us, whose first reaction to the idea that God might be doing something and God might be including us in that something is to throw up walls of doubt and skepticism. Maybe that's just me. But perhaps in this little story, God is challenging us and encouraging us to stop long enough and to shut up long enough to actually listen. Reverend Ryan and I have been using this little book, If Darwin Prayed, in our corporate worship and corporate prayer time. That was his pastoral prayer, was out of this little book this morning. And I love the line, when did we stop listening? When did we start thinking that we knew the answer before the question was even asked? When we knew what was going to come out of our partner or our spouse or our friend or our enemy before it's even spoken? Seems like maybe Zechariah, even before Gabe got the whole story out, Zechariah had his mind made up. Oh, how can this be? And Zechariah makes it clear that he's going to be in the way of this thing that God is doing. He becomes a barrier to this Advent plan. Sometimes I think we end up as barriers to the things that God is doing, right? Because God is always doing something new. And too often, I think, we bring our self-doubt and our disbelief and our negativity and our busyness and our work problems and our family problems, and we throw all of that up to God instead of really listening to what God might actually be saying. Because God might actually be saying, this is not an action item, this is information only. But we don't hear it because we're so busy with all this other stuff. And it seems that Gabe responds like your grandmother might, or at least my grandmother, who might say, if you don't have something nice to say, you shouldn't say anything at all. And so he doesn't get to until after John is born. It seems that if he can't say anything, then he can't spout his self-doubt and his negativity and all the other excuses that he's throwing up and getting in God's way. Now, I get that most of us, many of us, maybe just me, we are questioning people, right? And that's really hard to overcome. But I'm wondering this morning if there's a way that we can just change the question. Ask a different question. Sometimes finding the answer is about figuring out what the right question, or at least the best question, is. I saw a note on Facebook this week from a clergy friend of mine. He was quoting a blog that's old. It's 6 or 7 years old now. I actually had trouble finding it. But he talks about one of the most powerful questions that we can ask. What if? What if? Now, this isn't like, what if I won the lottery and became a multi-bajillionaire? What would I do? Not that kind of what if. Not the kind of what if of, what if aliens come or zombies take over Midtown? Not those kinds of what ifs. The kinds of what ifs that if we actually take seriously, can radically change our own lives. But of course, the blogger reminds its reader that the question only has power if you actually follow through. It has to be a situation that you can have some control over the outcome of. Storytellers and people who write television series and fiction stories, they take these questions of what if and ask, well, what if this character does this? How does that help the story play out going forward? What if? It seems that this whole idea of changing our own paradigm, instead of throwing up doubt and questions of negativity, to ask a different question, seems to be, for me at least, the question of Christmas. The Christmas might be about God coming to ordinary people over and over again and saying, hey, I'm doing this thing here, and I'd love for you to be a part of it. And we ask, wow, what if this Christmas thing might actually be true? Not just on the 25th day of December, but all year long. What if God is always trying to do a new thing of love and hope and joy and peace, all the gifts that the kids laid out for us all the time, and God is just waiting for us to say, what if I have a place in this? What if I told my coworker that their jokes were inappropriate and quit ignoring it and just stopping and turning around and walking away? What if I got serious about my health? What if I made the phone call I've been avoiding out of fear? What if I told someone I love them? What if? Fill in the blank. I think every year we have this opportunity that Christmas is about really believing that God is doing a new thing, even when that thing doesn't seem very realistic, maybe especially when it doesn't seem very realistic. That's usually when God tends to be most at work. Because the story of Zechariah seems to be that one way or another, God's going to do God's thing. The gift of Christmas is that you get to choose. We get to choose. We can be a part of it, choosing words of hope and joy and peace and love, good news, or we can be mute and simply be irrelevant. Maybe it's just me. Maybe you don't do these things. And I was honestly hesitant to tell this story, but the two Ryans in my life said it was important for me to tell this story, so I'm going to, because I'm Zechariah a lot. And I hope you're more Elizabeth and more Mary, but I'm just not most days. I am Zechariah most of the time. And about, 2 months ago, I got this email from this person I don't know. And that happens a lot because, our emails are on the website, and so people send us all kinds of crazy stuff. And so I got this email from this woman whom I didn't know, and she is a member of the Missouri State Commission for the Martin Luther King Commemorative Celebration. I think I got that right. And she was asking if I would speak at this event coming up. And I would be joining the two other pastors in speaking at this 50th anniversary of the King assassination event. And those two people happened to be Emmanuel Cleaver III and Adam Hamilton. Kevin had to come clean up the vomit off my desk. Just kidding. So I proceeded to spend the next hour of my day trying to figure out who was playing this joke on me, because nobody would really ask me to speak with two of the most prolific preachers in town. I'm not sure I have stilettos that tall, was my thought. And so for the next hour, I looked up this woman and I researched Missouri.gov whatever to see if this commission that, sounded like, I don't know what, but barely real, was real. Sure enough, Levon says, our business administrator, Levon, he says, oh yeah, she called last week. Okay. Is she real? Is she legit? Yep, think so. Feels like Zechariah to me a little bit. How often is God showing up in your life, asking you to be a part of this thing that God is doing? And you think, oh, God couldn't be using me in this way. It doesn't just happen at Advent. Christmas is trying to birth itself all the time. It's just a matter of whether we're paying attention and willing to say, what if this might be true? A few minutes ago, our kids talked to us about the gifts of Christmas. Gifts you can't buy. Hope that inspires, joy that surprises, peace that heals, love that endures. Why do you think it is that we love it when the kids do a Christmas pageant? Doesn't matter what they do. Seems because we believe in their ability to still believe that the words of Gabriel actually might be true. That they haven't become so cynical and full of doubt and negativity and all the other baggage that we carry around that makes our presents so daggone heavy we can't hold them. Our kids are still able to show us the gift of asking, what if, that opens up for us all the packages that God is trying to put under our little Christmas trees. Christmas gifts of dreams and possibilities beyond what we can even imagine. So I'm wondering this year, how might you say, what if? What if God might be calling you to whatever that might be? That what if story might impact your family, your community, your city, your country. It's like the little song. It's about actually believing that Christmas might happen every day. And if we only believe, we might have a part in it. You sang the words earlier. Like a child, we believe Jesus comes. I'm wondering if we might actually believe that this Christmas. May it be so. May it be so for us.